This is a short video about a part of the Mercedes R107 which hopefully you will never have to deal with. We've been slowly reassembling this Mercedes here, which we bought off eBay as a painted shell. Came with some parts but has a huge amount of parts missing, and one of the parts that's missing is this innocuous looking wheel well or spare wheel cover here. Now you would not believe how difficult it has been to take the spare wheel cover from our parts car here and transplant it onto our project car over there. One of the issues with these 107s is that they are prone to getting moisture in the trunk or boot of the car. Now we covered in the last video the replacement of the rear seals, and that's a common source of moisture. Another one is through the rubber gasket or drain hole that sits in the boot well. If that's missing or it's rock hard and it's not doing its job, you can also get water kicked up and moisture coming into the car that way. And if you leave sitting moisture sitting in your SL, I will show you what eventually happens. Now this up here is my first ever car, and you can see that it's had water sitting in that footwell and is eventually rotted through. This here is the parts car, and you can see what happens if you don't address the problem. And the whole boot or spare wheel well will rot out. In the case of the red project car that we're working on, you can see that the previous owners have laid in a brand new panel, which is what you'd have to do if you let moisture sit in your SL and didn't attend to it. One of the bits we need from the parts car is the spare wheel cover. Now unfortunately every single one of these bolts is rusted solid. I've tried to cut the whole thing out with an angle grinder, but that's just not going to work without the car on a ramp. So I'm now going to just try using the trusty Dremel tool. The trouble with an angle grinder is you can't get in flat enough without actually damaging either. They try and cut each top of the bolt off with this little cut-off wheel on a Dremel. Slowly but surely we're cutting off each one of the heads of these bolts. We've got two left to do. Under those bolts looks like there's also on this one what's left of a rusty washer. So hopefully when we cut those two off we'll be able to lift that piece out. So these here are all captive kind of square nuts that I think are welded on. So let's just have a look at the other car. The car we're trying to put together. As you can see, it has that wheel cover missing. Now I would have expected there to be a series of holes along here, which there aren't. However, there are the actual nuts underneath, so I suspect all we have to do is drill little holes in this panel. As I say, this car's had an awful lot of new panels, and maybe this particular panel didn't come with the holes pre-drilled, so we just have to mark out where the holes are and hopefully get them accurately lined up. So we'll take this panel out into the light and we can have a better look at it. You can see that some of the metal washers are still partially on there, and we will take this home, give it a thorough clean, and that should come up looking like new and allow us to put this piece on the car. We're just going to go over this with a drill with one of these Abrax fiber wheels on there. That's not too aggressive. It'll take off all of this rust without taking off the plastic. Giving this a wash with warm soapy water, and we're just going to go over it with the black in the flash now. Get rid of this last little marks. This will come out looking like new. Now this is not really a part that you're going to see because we'll probably end up carpeting the back of the car, but as I say, if you get used to restoring the bits that you don't see to a high standard, you'll find that restoring the bits you can see, even if it's a laborious task, will become all the much easier. It's not quite as good as new, but I think you'll agree that's an awful lot better than it was. We'll be replacing all the bolts and washers. These are M6, I think these are 16mm. You could use 12mm as well, and the washers are obviously M6 washers. Sounds like it should be a 5-minute job just to drill 6 holes along here and lay that spare wheel cover in. But the problem is that the nuts are actually welded on underneath, and because this is a new panel, what they should have done is actually drilled the holes before they put it on, because we are now tasked with trying to drill a hole exactly over the nut, slightly off, and it's all not going to fit. So we've measured it as best we can. We just have to see how we go. Made a tiny little indent just using the spring-loaded hole part. What we're going to do is the smallest drill bit we've got. Of course, it doesn't help that the fuel tank is in there. We've drilled the hole, and it's kind of on target, but it's not quite central. So we're going to drill another hole just ahead of it. Second hole is just about spot on central. Well, we got there in the end. We got our first hole drilled perfectly. We've tapped the threads using an M61 tap just through this top bit of metal. And somehow we've managed to line that up so it lines up with the bolt below. What we've got to do now is the other ones. With one of those holes perfectly lined up, all I need to do in theory is make a little template up, and then we'll just measure 10 centimeters exactly between these two holes. So we've got two small marks, 10 centimeters apart. We'll drill a small pilot hole here, and then we'll step it up and we'll actually tap out some M6 threads, so we'll be able to bolt that side down and have this side as a pilot hole. Drilled this hole out to 5.5, and that should allow us to tap an M6 thread in there. So that's an M61 thread, and the idea is we will screw the bolt into here and have that as the pilot hole. So the theory is we've bolted that down, there's a pilot hole there that should be exactly 10 centimeters away, and then we can just measure it up this way, which is exactly 2 centimeters. Just giving that a little bit of a clean out, and now we should be able to pop in the cover, and hopefully everything will line up. Soon find out. And that is job done on fitting the wheel well cover from the parts car, and we've still got two things to do, and that is to get some seals from here. These are about £8 each from Mercedes, and we need a little rubber seal down there, and then we're going to need to probably make up the long bolts and butterfly clip and round piece of metal that clamps the spare wheel in, but that's not particularly urgent to do that. So I'm going to leave the video here. I'm quite pleased with how that has gone. Just to recap, so far on this car, we've replaced the torsion springs, we've refurbished all the hinges on both sides, both the horseshoe deck and the boot hinges. We've done the rear lights. Next up, we're just going to sort out the trunk light, boot light here. It's been cut down there, so we'll have some wiring there to do. We've got these from the parts car, this strike plate. We're going to have to line that up. And that brings me on to the boot chrome, or the lock chrome here. It's in a terrible state on this car, and I'm not sure we're going to actually be able to use it, but strangely enough the chrome from the other cars in slightly better condition, although you wouldn't believe it, the state of the rest of the car. So we may just take the chrome off that, put it on, take the seal off there. I think the seal on the other car is in pretty good condition as well. And then in a separate video we will tackle the fuel tank, and we still need the panel there as well, but we'll tackle the fuel tank. It's a brand new fuel tank that they've put in here for some reason, but it'll all need to be hooked up to the fuel sender and all the fuel pipes, the expansion tank, etc. So we've got our work cut out, but I'm pleased with how things are going so far. Those rubber grommets in the spare wheel well, cheapest place to get them is from Mercedes, part number 107 997 2781, £2.10 plus VAT.